Look, unfortunately, a lot of Australians don't know who you are, wouldn't know why I'm talking to you, and don't know the background. But you're an ex-copper who got in a protracted, and I don't think it's inaccurate to say a bitter dispute with the service you once worked for. So, mate, could you tell us about that and what happened and how all that all came to be?
Yeah, okay, okay. So let's get one thing straight. I am an ex-copper, but my coppering was done many years ago, back in the very early 1990s. So all that did really was it blew away the mystique of policing, I think. So when the police came knocking on my door, I wasn't instantly cowed by them. I know what police officers are like. I'm from a family of police officers, so I didn't have that initial jerk of utter terror and immediate compliance. Addressing the me being a police officer, I was a really shit policeman. I was terrible. That's the truth of the matter. I was like, you could give me a description of somebody who was wanted, and they could walk right past me, and I just wouldn't notice. I'm rubbish at details. I'm the kind of guy that, if my wife says get something out of the fridge, if the label's changed or it's in the wrong position, I won't see it. I just don't see that level of detail. So, when your success as a beat bobby relies on spotting number plates and things like that, I was pretty poor at that. What I was good at was I was very good at interviewing people. I've got a skill. I got a skill for that. I quite enjoyed fighting. I think I was always fairly entrepreneurial in my thinking. So once I realised that they weren't going to make me chief constable within the year, I kind of left, and that's when I set up my own business, unloading coal ships at the port of Immingham, and I was very successful at that. Ended up employing over 100 people, unloading around about 150 million tons of coal, quite a bit of it coming from Australia, I've got to say. So I had a very successful business. And in 2018, my wife had alerted me with some alarm, to the growing tendency for men to identify as women, and not just to identify as women in the old-fashioned way of, being a tranny, getting dressed up in women's gear and sort of pouncing around like you do. That's absolutely fine. We've had transvestites with us forever. I think they're a bit weird, but hey ho, we live and let live, and it's absolutely fine. In a club, and when they're singing along and doing the karaoke and doing the shows, I absolutely love it. Dame Edna, God bless her, absolutely fantastic. But it had moved from that to this strange statement that trans women, are actual women. That simply by declaring that you are a woman, you magically become one. This massively offended my sense of philosophy, my sense of ontology and epistemology, my sense of rationality. But more than that, my wife pointed out that 51% of the population are female, and that this was going to make this was putting sex-based protections at risk. If anybody can be a woman just by saying I'm a woman, saying the magic words that I'm a woman, then instantly all your sex-based protections come crumbling down. They're nothing more than a useless Maginot Line, and that disturbed me. So I started tweeting to my very few followers on Twitter, and I was so popular on Twitter that if anybody liked one of my tweets, I would sort of have a little party and think that I was influencing the world. I was ignored by the millions, roundly by the millions. I ended up over a year or so building up about 600 followers, very few of whom ever engaged with me, until one day. So it was January 2019, and I was down at the local shop doing some shopping for my wife, and I was sitting in the car park playing Candy Crush when I got a phone call from my office, and it was my managing director, and he's like, "Mate, we just had the police here." I'm like, "Really? What they wanted?" I'm thinking parking fine. I don't know, no idea what I could have done. Said, so I've got the number. I didn't give him your number, but I've got his number if you want to give him a ring. So I rang him up, and he explained that his name was PC Gull from Humberside Police Community Liaison Division. And he said to me, he said, "Are you Harry the Owl on Twitter?" And I went, "Yeah, that'll be me." Yeah. He said, "Well, we've got a complaint." I said, "Right, okay." He said, "Yeah, somebody said that Immingham Dock is going to be a very dangerous place because you're working down there and you're a raging transphobe, and we're very concerned for the transgender population at Immingham Dock." At which point I just like burst out laughing. I'm like, "Have you ever been to Immingham Dock, mate? People down there, they still like point at the sky when a plane goes over. It's not progressive central. There's barely any gays there, let alone any transvestites. It's just not that sort of place." I said, the idea that there's going to be a bunch of transgender people in my workplace who are terrified of me is just utter nonsense. He said, "Well, nevertheless, we've had this complaint." I said, "Look," I said, "is anything that I've tweeted criminal?" And he said, "Oh, no." I said, "So why are you ringing me then? Why, if it's criminal, why are you ringing me?" He said, "Well, you know, a lot of it is offensive and we have to do that." I said, "Well, hold on a minute." I said, "Just hold your horses." I said, if nothing that I've tweeted is criminal, just tell me again why you're ringing me." And he said, "I need to check your thinking." And I was like, whoa. I said, "I beg your pardon." He said, "I need to check your thinking." I said, "Right, so let me get this straight. I've not committed any crime." He said, "No. But you need to check my thinking." Yes. I said, "Have you any idea what you sound like?" He said, "No." I said, "Right. 1984 is a dystopian novel. It's not a police how-to manual. You don't get to ring me up to check my thinking. You just don't get to do that." Okay, so I said, "How many tweets have you got there?" He said, "Well, we've got 31 tweets." I said, "Right, and none of them are criminal." He said, "No." I said, "Right, okay, so which is the one, in your professional opinion, that comes closest to being criminal? The one that, if I'd just gone a little bit further, it would have crossed that threshold into criminality?" And he said, "Well, you published a limerick." I went, "You what? Are you on something? A limerick?" I said, "I've never written a limerick in my life." He said, "No, you retweeted a limerick." I said, "Yeah, and so what?" He said, "Well, you know, that, as far as I'm concerned, is the one that that came the closest to being criminal." Now, I looked up, I eventually found this retweeted limerick, and I'll repeat what I can remember of it here, because it says this. It says, what was it? Your hormones are synthetic. What was it? Your hormones are synthetic. Your breast. It had the lines like, "Your breasts are made of silicon. Your hormones are synthetic." I can't even remember the bloody thing, in all honesty. Well, like, I didn't write that. I just retweeted it. He said, "Well, nevertheless, it's we need to check your thinking." I said, "Well, why you need to check my thinking?" He said, "Because without police intervention, this will escalate to crime." I said, "What crime? What possible way could retweeting somebody else's limerick escalate to a crime?" And he said, "The murder of Stephen Lawrence." I went, "Well, one, I think you'll find Stephen Lawrence is already dead. He was killed back in the 1990s. And that was a racist attack by a bunch of racist thugs who'd been bragging about how they wanted to go around stabbing and hanging black people. And you're equating that to me retweeting somebody else's feminist limerick. That's just absolutely, utterly insane." He said, "Well, nevertheless, the victim has decided." I said, whoa, you don't get to use terms like victim, because there hasn't been a crime, so how can there be a victim? He said, "Well, we have to call them victim. That's what the rules say. So he's the victim, and or she's the victim, and you're the suspect." I'm like, you don't get to use terminology like victim and suspect like this. You just don't get to do it. He says, "So what's going to happen now is you've now got a non-crime hate incident against your name." I'm like, what the hell is a non-crime hate incident? He said, "Well, a hate incident is a non-crime hate incident is where there isn't a crime, but we have to record it anyway because it's likely to escalate into a crime. The murder of Stephen Lawrence, for instance, or the murder of a transgender person or something like that." I said, "This is absolutely insane. you've got to understand that this is insane. And we had a conversation for about 35, 40 minutes. And eventually he said to me, he said, Mr. Mill, what you've got to understand is this. Sometimes in the womb, a female brain accidentally grows the wrong body parts. And that's what being trans is. I'm like, just say that again. He said, you know, sometimes a female brain in the womb accidentally grows the wrong body parts. And that's what being trans is. And I said, you cannot possibly believe that. And he said, oh yeah, I've been on a course. I'm like, right, okay. So I said, I think this conversation's ending right now. So I then wrote to the police and said, what is this absolute bollocks you're on about? What's this non-crime hate incident? And they doubled down and said, no, you recorded for a non-crime hate incident because in our opinion, you're a dangerous transphobe, and unless we intervene, this could escalate into something very, very serious. Now, what they based that on was a 1950s study by a fellow called Gordon Allport, called the Allport Scale. And level 1 of the Allport Scale is anti-locution. So speaking negatively about something. The logic is that left unhindered, this will escalate to level 5, which is genocide. So the police argued that me retweeting a feminist limerick and 30 other lesser tweets, if you like, was a precursor to genocide. Now, anybody with any ounce of common sense has got to understand that that is utterly cretinous. It's absolutely unsupported drivel, ideological claptrap, not worthy of respect in a democratic society. So we challenged the chief constable and said, you will remove this non-crime hate incident. And they said, no, the national guidance says we must record it. And we said, well, in that case, we'll challenge the national guidance as well. We got hold of the non-crime hate incident guidance, and it was quite incredible if you read it in the 2014 version, which they were operating under at the time. It says that in the absence of a crime, any incident must be recorded as a non-crime hate incident if it is an incident perceived by any individual, the victim or anybody else, to include hostility towards on the basis of race, disability, sexuality, ethnicity, or gender identity. No evidence of the hate element is necessary. Like, that's just absolutely crazy. So you've created this thing called a non-crime hate incident where you don't even need a crime and you don't even need any evidence of hate. This is insane, absolutely insane. So we took the College of Policing, who set the guidance, through the High Court, and the Chief Constable of Humberside, who'd followed the guidance through the High Court. In quite a bizarre ruling, the Chief Constable of Humberside was likened by the High Court to the Stasi, the Cheka, and the Gestapo, which is quite which is quite a thing for a judge to say, and found them that they created a chilling effect by contacting me, turning up at my workplace, all this sort of stuff. But bizarrely, they said the actual the guidance itself was not unlawful. Only following it was unlawful. So we thought, well, that's entirely illogical. How can you have national guidance which is lawful, but following it is unlawful and leads you to being compared to a Nazi? So we went to the Court of Appeal with that, and we won. And the guidance was struck down. And a year later, they still hadn't, the College of Policing had still not amended their unlawful guidance. So Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, stepped in and last month published guidance reflecting my ruling from the Home Office. And then the College of Police finally got their act together last month and published some preliminary guidance, which kind of reflected the ruling. So that's where we are. Now, I don't think any of that is me being bitter. I think that is me being standing for absolute common sense. I think that me doing that is what anybody, any normal, rational human being who is not cowed by fear would do. And that's why I became so incredibly popular with right-thinking people, virtually overnight, because when the police first approached me, I went and did a quick sort of 9 or 10 part thread on Twitter, and my followers went up from like from just a few hundred to thousands and thousands overnight. And then the world's press turned up at my door, and hey ho, that's how a movement was born.
What was the learned judge's reasoning to be able to say that the police doing something that was lawful is unlawful? Like how?
Yeah, it made no sense to us either. We couldn't, because we'd have understood it if the College of Policing had said, look, our guidance is great, the chief constable did it all wrong, we'd have understood, but he didn't. The College of Policing said the chief constable followed the guidance to the letter. So we were like, well, how can it be then that following the guidance to the letter leads the police who follow it to be likened to the Stasi, the Cheka, and the Gestapo, but the guidance which they were following is lawful? It makes no sense at all.
No, and that's right. And see, this is so important. I'd really like you to comment on what the Court of Appeal, like if they said anything about the previous judges kind of like making that comment, which is fundamentally having a bet both ways. But the other thing is, like, as a proud former police officer, like what that smacks to me of is the establishment saying, no, it's the guys at the front line. It's them. You know,
that's exactly what I think the judge did. I think he thought, right, if I give Harry a massive win against the chief constable, I can get away with not messing with the national guidance. I think that's what he thought. But he misunderstood my strategy. My strategy was always to go for the College of Policing. As far as I was concerned, the Chief Constable of Humberside, that was a skirmish in the foothills. The prize that I was after was knocking out this ridiculous guidance, because we found that there had been, since 2014, the police have recorded 250,000 non-crime hate incidents against people.
I'm sorry.
250,000 non-crime hate incidents against individuals. Now, it gets worse than this, because not only is no evidence of hate required, there is no necessity for the police to tell you that you've got a non-crime hate incident recorded against your name. They may tell you, they may not tell you. But even worse than that, they are disclosable on an enhanced DBS check. So, yeah, exactly. So
let's explain that to the listeners that don't have our background. Something that's been reported to the police that they don't even need to speak to you about, that isn't a crime, can be recorded on a database with a clear adverse inference against you, and released to people who check for that as an adverse inference against you, as some sort of indication as your character, which is of course going to impact on your employability. It's going to impact on your public reputation. It's going to impact on all those things. Did I get that correct?
You got that absolutely correct. And they argued for that in the court, that they shouldn't be allowed to release these non-crime hate incidents on an enhanced DBS check to a potential employer if I was working with if I would apply to a job that worked with any vulnerable group. So, for instance, if I applied to work in the university, in a charity, with kids, then this would be released to the potential employer. And if you look at the physical record, what it says is crime report on the top, not non-crime. It says crime report, and then it describes me as the suspect, and then it describes the complainant as the victim, and then it says crime, transgender hate. And then in the small print, it says category non-crime crime. What does that even mean? What is a non-crime crime? That is pure Orwellian doublespeak. Now, if I'm an employer, potential employer, I get that through. What am I going to read? I'm going to read crime reports. I'm going to read suspect. Yeah. I'm going to read hate. I'm not going to read the small print that says non-crime crime. And even if I did read it, I wouldn't understand it. That application would get filed in the waste paper bin. 250,000 of these things have been knocking around the country. So again, this is not me being a bitter ex-cop. This is me being, I think, a decent, upstanding, rational, logical human being who's said, "Screw this! You picked on the wrong bastard." Because I'm coming for you.
Well, the other thing is, again, and I'm really sorry to harp on about this, but I try very hard to remove the police from my identity now that I'm out. Just by way of explanation, very briefly, I went through the academy in Queensland in 91. And was sworn in December 91 and did a 30-year career. So do the math. I've only been out.
You're a proper ex-policeman, not 10-bomb line.
I'm a proper bully man, eh? That's the Indigenous.
Yeah.
Or Biden. The Torres Strait Island nickname is I'm a proper Biden. Yeah, but like to us, because it's so close to your identity. It's like, you join to do the right thing. You join to uphold the. And look, I'm not every cop, but I'm a lot of cops from my generation. Like, I look to the generations before, the ones that fought, the Second World War, or the First World War, and I wanted to uphold and be part of those institutions and those values that stretch way, 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 way back. And I wanted to pass them on. I saw myself as one of the good guys, and I still do. Like, it's not that I didn't fail. It's not that I didn't falter. It's not that I didn't make some big mistakes. I'm quite sure there are people that are not alive today because of mistakes that I've made. I also know that there are people that are alive today because of decisions that I've made and things that I've done. I haven't been perfect, but on the balance, I would suggest that my career was a force for good. It matters to us. It's so deep. It's our identity. It's who you are. Like, you don't, as you found out being a business person, you don't join the police for the money. Like, the money's okay in Queensland, don't get me wrong. But like, you're not joining it for the money, and you're certainly not joining it for the conditions.
No.
You find, like, how did you find this impacted on your relations with frontline cops? Did you get much support from frontline police? I'd imagine this caused a bit of a split in the policing community. Can you talk about that? Because I know a lot of listeners are current and serving coppers.
Yeah, it did. So immediately, once this happened, a few people gathered around me, including some serving officers, and we decided that we would organise. And one of our serving officers said, "Let's call the organisation Fair Cop, because we want to demonstrate that we believe that cops are fair." And of course, there's the play on words of something being a fair cop. So we immediately did that. Now, the officers that gathered around me had to remain entirely anonymous, obviously. We had to protect their identities. And I would go to prison before I revealed the identity of anybody who works with us. We've consistently, since 2019, we've had a steady stream of police officers get hold of us. And what they tend to do is they tend to send me information that concerns them greatly, which isn't in the public domain. And then what I do is I put in a freedom of information request to the police force saying, "I'm aware of this document or this policy." They give it to me, and then I publish it from Fair Cop, and we publish it that way. So that way we're able to absolutely protect the identity of our officers. But what we are planning on doing, possibly in the next year or two, is opening up Fair Cop to open membership to the police. Because whilst there's a clear restriction on the police joining a political association, we argue we are not a political association. What we stand for is the rule of law as it is. We're not campaigning to change the law. We're doing the same job as the police. Uphold the law. So why should a police officer not be able to openly join Fair Cop? And what we would like to do, because I don't know what it's like over in Australia, but representation for the police is in the form of a thing called the Police Federation, which is sort of an internal union. And without knocking every police federation rep in the country, I don't want to do that. But my experience tells me that very, very often, particularly on matters of pertaining to free speech, the federation reps are letting down their membership. They're letting down constables. The habit tends to be, look, mate, go in, say you're sorry, say you're guilty, say you're sorry, and we'll mitigate the punishment. I'm like, no, that's not how you represent your members. How you represent your members is, first and foremost, do you think you did something wrong or did not? If you say you did nothing wrong, then we're going to fight, we'll fight with everything we've got to get you off the charge, not to mitigate it. That's down the road. And so I would like very much to set up a open fair cop membership where one way or another we can officially and formally help police officers who find themselves being coerced into supporting things that they simply do not support or believe in. If you are a massive supporter of trans rights and you're a police officer, that's fine. I just don't want to know about it. And neither should anybody else. You need to be absolutely vanilla. We need to look at you as a police officer and go, we have no idea what that officer thinks outside of their upholding the law and the King's peace. And that's it. That's it. We need to take the example from her late Majesty.
Yeah.
Nobody had a bloody clue what she thought about anything. She was absolutely vanilla, totally and utterly vanilla.
Absolutely.
No idea. And that's what we want our police force to be like. And it's interesting because the police in this country, they when they join, they take the oath of attestation, which is to the sovereign. And the police officer swears to keep the sovereign's peace, to uphold the law, and that's it. That's it. Unfortunately, since the 2002 Police Acts, they changed the oath of attestation. So in there now is keep the King's peace, uphold the law, and human rights. And I'm like, whoa, hold on a minute. Which human rights? Because there are 1,000 voices crying out human rights. Amnesty International have got one version of human rights. Stonewall have got another version. If you're in the States, particularly if you're in states like Montana or Texas, carrying a gun is a human right. So there needs to be some clarity as to what do you mean when you make an oath of attestation that says, I'm going to serve the law and human rights.
This is a really important discussion, and I want to make a comment, and I'd really be interested on your take on this. I joined the police to uphold human rights, but not in the modern sense. And there's this strange idea that human rights is this 1960s invention, and before the UN conventions, nothing was there. Of course, basic human rights, they do stem from the Magna Carta and following documents after that. But this idea, so first the idea that they didn't exist before then is just wrong.
Yeah.
They're part of the very fabric, the DNA of the way that justice is administered in the Anglosphere countries. You have a right to remain silent. That's a human right. You have all these rights. But see, Harry, these rights are held as an individual.
Yeah.
Held as an individual. So as an individual, you have that right. I think the best way, my deep concern with what I call human rightsism now is because they take this idea of rights away from the individual and put it on a collective. So what that means in practice is this. So Matthew Maloney has all of these different characteristics. Some of them immutable, and some of them chosen. So religion and stuff like that are chosen. I have other immutable characteristics. I'm mixed race. There's all these things about me. But traditionally, Anglosphere law, the conceptual framework has been this: I am an individual that happens to have traits, whereas the human rights thing flips that on its head and says, no. You're a trait. In fact, a hierarchy of traits that happens to an individual. Yeah. That is this is why I'm so deeply concerned about human rights, Harry. It's turning human rights, actual individual human rights, upside down. This is a deep attack at the most fundamental level on the Anglosphere conceptualization of the British, let's say, the British conceptualization of law, justice administration, impartial courts. Because that's giving up impartiality. You think about it, Harry, it follows up from it. It's not like, so the person stand before me, what's your name? Matthew Maloney. I'm going to treat you like Matthew Maloney. It's like, okay, what's your race? All of these things are going to matter. They have to matter if we're going to start conceptualizing people as traits. They must matter, and that will turn ironically, it's a progressive cause, but of course, it's a massive leap back into tribalism. And without going into too much of my personal background, I've lived in tribal areas inside of Australia and outside of Australia. I've lived with tribal people who really do conceptualize things through the tribe, the clan, and other collectives. And let me tell you, it's not that it doesn't work at all, because, you know, those people are still surviving, but it just doesn't deliver the outcomes that we have now. It's such a big deal, and this is why it matters. And I'd like you to, because one of the other things that I was going to get you to kind of like ask, I was going to make a comment and get you to speak about it, should you feel so inclined. It's like, okay, well, this is the mother country. This is the mother country of all the Anglosphere nations. And incidentally, because I say that, and I've actually had viewers in the past going, oh, so you just mean the United States, Canada, New Zealand, Australia. You mean the white countries, Matt? No. I've lived in Anglosphere nations that are not white. Papua New Guinea, although it's in the Anglosphere. There are all these other countries. Look, even with a lot of qualifications, India is kind of in the Anglosphere.
Yeah.
All these Pacific nations that are part of the Commonwealth are in the Anglosphere. This is not a white person thing. These are ideas, incidentally, too. And this is what I say when I'm explaining to people. So, you know, you've got to remember, England, when it was forming, when it talked about race, it didn't mean skin color. Like the Irish, my surname is Maloney, were a different race. The Scots were a different race. The Welsh were a different race. So what we call ethnic groups now were different races. And these ideas linked those ethnic groups. And incidentally, they link races as effectively as they link those very, very different ethnic groups. So, I mean, you still see in Ireland, you know, God bless my spiritual mother country, Ireland. But like it still has, like, you know, it's a Catholic country. So it doesn't, you know, it still really doesn't bottom of its heart, doesn't do the individualism. It really looks towards the idea of maybe the Holy Roman Empire or something like that coming out again. It looks to all of these things. I don't think people get that. And so now that I've finished my little rant, I suppose, I really like to get you to comment on that, and especially to indicate to people two things: why you think this matters outside of Humberside and the United Kingdom, what are the and why you decided to die on this particular hill.
There's lots to unpack there, so
it is. Yeah, and I'm sorry.
I'll start with that last point first, actually, because I can deal with that quite quickly. For good or ill, where British law goes, the rest of the world tends to follow. That's just the way it is. British jurisprudence has got a lot of respect. It's quoted throughout the world, so that's why it matters there. The second point to that is that in Britain, and I'm assuming in Australia as well, we are fundamentally free. We are fundamentally free to think, to speak, to act, to do, right up until the point that the state says this far and no further through a clearly defined law. And that differs that's very different from the European model, which is a system of state permissions, where Napoleon, if you like, gives you a permission to think, to speak, to do. So everything's unlawful unless Napoleon says it's lawful. In this country, everything is legal unless the sovereign says it's illegal. And when I say the sovereign, I mean the sovereign through the sovereign bodies of states, etc. So that's why that's important. So this idea that the police could interfere with something called a non-crime it instantly begins to attack that fundamental principle of our freedom. So that's why it matters. Why I die on that particular hill is because I look back into recent history, and I see that our soldiers of the First World War and particularly the Second World War, certainly in Britain, and I think also Australia, there was no necessity for Australians or the Brits to go to war. We weren't immediately threatened by what Hitler was doing. We weren't. Hitler would have left Britain alone if we just kept our mouths shut. But we fought for something more than our own safety. We fought for an idea of liberty and democracy and freedom. That's why we went to war. Now, I risked my house and my reputation and all the rest of it, but I didn't risk losing a limb. I didn't risk getting my legs blown off. I didn't risk, a bullet in the brain. And so there are thousands and thousands of people who've gone before me who risked all of that and paid the ultimate price in order to secure freedom and liberty. So when the battle came to my door, what choice did I have as a decent human being? I could either at that point go, you know what, I'm just not made of that stuff, or I could go, you know what, I'm in the tradition of something that's worth fighting for. And I'm fortunate and blessed enough that A, I have the character for it. B, I have sufficient knowledge to know when somebody is pissing up the trouser leg. And C, I'm sufficiently well established that I can't be bullied by a HR department or a mortgage company or anything like that. So what choice have I got, really? I've got to fight this, or I'm just not in the proud tradition of the best of British. And
either we are a link in the chain going way back to our ancestors, or we are the weak link that breaks. There is no alternative.
No, absolutely. I wasn't looking for it. I didn't ask for it. I was looking forward to, because I was winding down the business. So I was looking forward to a life of watching Netflix and being my natural lazy self. And then this happened, and it's all changed. But there are points in your life when you just have to make a choice. And I think I made absolutely the right one. So moving back to your earlier questions there. This concept of human rights, a human right which is contested it's a political discussion. Okay, so we've had them throughout history. Should we have slavery or should we not have slavery? Should we have emancipation? Should we not have emancipation? Should we have universal suffrage? Should we not have universal suffrage? Now, once those things have been established and set in law, it becomes plainly obvious that, well, that was a human right. Of course, it's a human right. Well, it's beyond question. But at any point in history, these things are up for debate, and there will always be resistance, and there will always be progressives. Sometimes that turns into a war, as in the American Civil War, which was fundamentally over slavery, and then it gets established. So my point is this: even if this whole trans thing in 100 years' time becomes settled, right now it's not settled. Right now, it is an active political debate. And the police, it's not the job of the police to guess which is going to be the right side of history and to jump on it. It's not the job of the police to get ahead of the curve. It's the job of the police to police the law as it is. So unless a human right has been established and embodied and codified into the law of that land, then the police need to have nothing to do with it whatsoever. Nothing.
That's right.
They have to remain utterly vanilla, utterly no idea what you think police are, because I, as a member of the public, am relying on you to serve without fear and without favor. And I need it not to matter which side of the political divide I am on. And I need to be assured, because I don't know what side of the political divide you are on. And that way, the contract between the public and the police remains firm.
Yeah, and that's right. And here's the other thing about law. This is what I'm explaining to people. Okay, yeah, law specifically identifies and brings in a high resolution an act or omission that someone isn't allowed to do. All right? Yeah. And of course, we always think mostly in the terms of 10 Commandments stuff: I shall not kill, they shall not steal, they shall not. Even with more hazy stuff like domestic violence, at least there's kind of like, all right, we're looking at these specific acts. But what people don't understand is too, it limits when authority can act on you.
Yes.
So if there's this turning around, like you're talking about before, like the continental idea of like the only things that are allowed are licensed. The Anglo-Seer turns that on its head and goes, no, everything's allowed unless it's specifically prohibited. And there really is this continental creep, I like to call it. And, ironically, it's from because I know a couple of human rights lawyers, and I annoy them, and I always do this, human rights lawyers, because it is ironic. You're actually not dealing with individual humans, and they really are Orwellian. You're dealing with collectives. So first, wrong conceptual framework. Secondly, you're not about increasing the rights of individuals. You're about crushing them. You're about this idea of like, we've got to reverse things so that the only things that are allowed are things that are licensed. Now, we've been talking about how the police have been acting in this, and thank God that hasn't come to Australia's shores yet, but it is coming. And I had a discussion with one of my great friends, colleagues, and who ended up as one of my superiors, about the way the job is going in Queensland. And I said, the time is coming very shortly where the police authorities are going to make you do something that goes against your conscience. Yeah. And like, you're on a really good wicket. You're like, you got a house, you're a respected, and he's a great man, like seriously, a respected member of the community, respected boss, respected policeman, respected everything. And it's going to be small. It's going to start off small. Kind of come in and say, punish this young constable, or punish this burnout old sergeant, or this. And it's going to twinge against you. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
What are you going to do? And he said, oh, that happens all the time. Like, people come to take my staff away from me and stuff like that to go on rubbish operations. I go, you're not getting it. You're not listening. They're going to come and ask you to do something that's going to go against your conscience, to punish someone who doesn't deserve to be punished. And it's going to start off small and seemingly not. But that frog will be boiled very quickly after that, because you've shown that you can do it. And it's
that's the worry. That most definitely is the worry. And you're right. For instance, we have a thing called the Equality Act 2010, which identifies nine immutable characteristics, or so-called immutable characteristics, and gives you protection from them. Now, what's happened is, so religion, for instance, is a protected characteristic. That's absolutely fine. But what that act was designed for is to protect the individual with the characteristic of a particular of a religion, not to be discriminated against, and that's fine. So that means that if I'm an employer, I can't go, you're a Jew, I'm not employing you. You're a Muslim, I'm not employing you. I'm not that. Okay, so it protects the individual from discrimination. Now, what's happened is, over time, there's been an anthropomorphism where it's gone from protecting the individual to protecting not only the group, but also the ideology of the group. So, for instance, we get a situation where if you criticize, the protected characteristics in my instance would be a gender recognition certificate. A person holding or intending to hold a GRC, that's a protected characteristic. But that's been twisted so that anybody who, like me, who criticizes, mocks, satirizes the ideology of gender identity, the claim is, oh, you've broken the Equality Act. No, I didn't. No, not at all. And it gets even worse. There's I don't know whether you saw that a young boy in the Bradford area, West Yorkshire, a few weeks ago. He was an autistic boy, and it's a very, very Muslim area, Muslim school, and he took into school his own copy of the Quran and dropped it. That's all he did, dropped it. And as a result of dropping it, it got a scuff on it. Not only was the boy expelled, he was reported to the anti-terrorist unit, and the police went to the mosque and sat with the leaders of the mosque and said that this was showed terrible disrespect to the Quran and terrible disrespect to the Muslim community. And they had the mother there who is on video begging for mercy in front of a police officer, begging for mercy. Now, that cannot possibly be right. How can dropping a book, dropping your own book, elicit that response? Because the reason is we've moved from protecting the individual to actively protecting a group and an ideology. And there is definitely a hierarchy.
Of course there is. Of course there is. So a chap can write a book called The God Delusion, mocking anyone who believes in any sort of higher power, and power to him. I actually think it's a good book, although I disagree with it. Is that guy going to be facing an terrorist unit? Is that going to go? The copper's going to be sitting with the with the Archbishop of Canterbury, whomever is heading the Catholic Church there. Are they all going to be sitting there looking at Richard Dawkins going, Dick, mate?
Oh, well, I don't know in Australia, but since 2012, we've had at the West End a thing called the Book of Mormon, written by the guys from South Park, and it absolutely rips a new arsehole into Mormons. Totally rips a new arsehole.
Yeah.
It is utterly blasphemous. No problem at all. No problem at all. You could not have the Book of Quran and the same. That the writer would be arrested, the actor would be arrested. Any actor that wasn't arrested would be hunted down and killed. And audience members would be barracked and killed. So we have a most definite hierarchy in the UK. And right at the very top is Islam. There is transgenderism, and then it goes off into other things like eco-zealotry, for instance. So the police will stand around whilst the eco-zealots block the road and glue themselves and prevent thousands of Londoners from getting to work. And the police will go and serve them tea and coffee whilst they're doing it.
Yeah.
Literally serve them tea and coffee whilst they're doing it. We have a hierarchy of protected ideologies. If you're a Christian, you're
without fear or favor, without malice or ill will. Exactly. That.
Exactly. So this is how it works. I'm friends with a former assistant chief constable of Merseyside, and in the Liverpool area, there's a big population of Irish, massive, and of course they're split right down the middle, Catholics and Protestants. The more extreme Protestants are part of a thing called the Orange Order, and every year they have a massive parade where they wave their red, orange flags and all the rest of it, have marching bands. Now, the standing order to any police officer on duty that day was this: do not even accidentally walk in time to the beat of the drum, in case it gives an impression of support. That's proper policing. Now we've gone from not walking accidentally in time to the beat of the drum to providing the bloody band, because that's what the police do. At pride marches, they'll put on a band. They'll not only march in time, they're there banging the drum, literally banging the drum. Like, no, you can't do this, because that is not serving without fear or favor. That is through your colors, through your flags, through your epaulets, through your rainbow laces, you are signaling to any onlooker that you have picked a side.
Yeah.
You have picked a side. So what I've said to chief constables is this: look, one, I don't want you marching in pride parades, but if you feel like you must because of some perverse sense of community engagement, how about this? This is my compromise. Make sure that you put on your best uniform, stripped of everything other than police insignia, and you march beneath a banner that says serving all our communities without fear and favor. That way you signal support to the pride lot without pissing off everybody else. But they won't do it. They won't do it because they've picked a political side and they're invested in showing political support for that side. That is why I'm so militant, and why I will not leave the field of battle on this, because it's important.
Yeah, it really is totally important, because, I mean, you think of the implications for that. Well,
yeah.
the other thing
did you see the video of me getting arrested last summer?
No.
All right. No. Okay. So
did you go quietly, Harry? Did you go quietly?
No, I didn't. No. You need to type in into YouTube Bad Law Project: Rise of the British Gestapo, and there's like a 25-minute video of me being arrested. What happened was, a former Royal Green Jacket down in Hampshire. One weekend he'd been visited by two police officers because he'd taken. They said, look, you've committed a crime. You've committed the crime of placing a trans flag that looks a little bit like a swastika onto a Facebook group, and somebody's complained about it, and we're investigating you for a crime. And he said, well, I'm not entirely sure about this. I don't think that is a crime. So they said, and he caught it all on camera, because his house, it's like he's expecting the Taliban to come charging in at him anytime. He's got videos everywhere. So it was all on tape, all on camera. And these police officers says, you've definitely committed a crime, and the option of this, we can either prosecute you, or you can give us £60 and we'll send you on a re-education course.
Oh, that's extortion. You can't do that.
I know. Will
There's
you come
case
back in
law
the
on
week?
it. There's clear case
No,
law on it.
I know. So he sent me the tape, and I looked at it and thought, this is crazy, extortion. Exactly. This is a shakedown. So we went there. I got a film crew, and we went back for when the police were coming. And we hid in the kitchen, and we waited until they'd sort of tried to shake him down again. And then we came bursting out of the kitchen and confronted them. And I confronted them about pace, said that you're not given a caution. It ended up with a standoff. And I said, look, if you're going to arrest him, you're going to have to fucking arrest me. It's simple as that. And I just stood there like this. And I said, you, army veteran, you stand behind me. They're not arresting you. And I said, right, you're obstructing arrest. I said, well, come on then, arrest me. And eventually, I think 6 or 7 police officers turned up. And eventually, I was cuffed and thrown in the back of the van and hauled off to the Hampshire police station. And then they arrested the army veteran over a bloody flag. Over a flag. Now, that story went absolutely viral because we live streamed it to about 5 million people, the arrest. The following morning, the Police and Crimes Commissioner for Hampshire came out absolutely in our support. The world went I was on Sky Australia, we were in the States, we were on Tucker Carlson, we were all over the place. Because this was a clear case of us exposing the police massively overreaching and conducting a shakedown, a straight up shakedown. So I really encourage your listeners and viewers to go check that out because it's interesting. And what it showed me is that the police, our current proper police, do not understand the very basics of arrest, don't understand the basics of interrogation and questioning. It's very clear. If you suspect that a person has committed a criminal offence, you must give them a caution.
Yeah,
what you don't do is... When I challenged them on this, I said, you didn't give a caution. They said, we don't need to. That comes when we take them to the police station. Says, no. That's not what Pace says. I've not been a copper for years. And I knew what Pace says. I know what the law says. They didn't know what they were trying to arrest the guy for. They got all their crimes muddled up. They borrowed a little bit from the Public Order Act, a little bit from the Communications Act. They didn't know what they were doing. They had no idea. But what was interesting, so I was arrested. I was held in the cells for several hours. And then the interview team came to interview me at about midnight. And I knew what my defence was, that the offence that they got me on was obstructing the police in the lawful execution of their duty. And my defence was it was
not an unlawful arrest. Yeah, it's not a lawful arrest. They're in the execution of their duty. Yeah.
What was really interesting, when the copper took me back to the cell, he looked around like this and went, "Harry, I'm a massive fan. We all follow Fair Cop. We think you're absolutely fantastic. Is there anything we can get you from the canteen? Anything at all?" And I'm like, all right, mate, you are. So it just gave me real heart that whilst we had on the one hand these zombie-like automatons who made the arrest, back with the grown-ups, they knew that I was right and their colleagues were not just wrong, but terribly wrong.
Well, okay, on that, the ultimate responsibility in my mind, and I'd like you to comment on this, feel free to disagree, is the legislators, the people that have written this really crap legislation.
And I'll just stop you there, because I don't think the law is wrong. I think the knowledge and understanding of the law is insufficient by those seeking to execute it. And then there's a confusion because what the police aren't taught the law anymore, so it seems to me, or what they are taught, it's masked through a thing called guidance. And the guidance is wrong. The guidance is so often wrong. What they will do is they will take a word at law, for instance, sex, and they will change it to gender and say sex is the same as gender and gender is anything. No, that's not what sex means in the context of when the law was made. So they will take holding a gender recognition certificate and they will say, well, what that really means is gender identity. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. It means a gender recognition certificate. That's what it means. And so through the filter of guidance, law is changed and manipulated so that by the time the enforcer gets it, it's been changed to something entirely different.
So it's an administrative change rather than a change of legislation. But that raises the question.
Yes, exactly.
Was it the intention of the legislators that this happened?
No, definitely not. No. And this is one of the other things that we seem to have lost, is that because we have because the law is only there to fix a problem and prevent a clear problem and fill a clear gap. You know, people have been overreaching with their freedoms, either to steal or blah, 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 whatever. You've got to keep in mind what was the purpose of the legislation when it was passed? What was the problem that the legislator was trying to fix? And then you've got to be very careful about stretching that out so that it encapsulates something entirely different, which was not in the mind of the legislator. So the Communications Act, for instance, that was designed to stop me and you, sending abusive dick pics to our exes, or sending pictures of beheadings to people that we just wanted to cause trouble for, shock and disturb. It wasn't designed to protect a group from being offended because somebody puts up a picture of a flag. It wasn't, that's not what it was designed to do. The law has been stretched and manipulated to try and capture that, but that's not what it was there. That's not what it was there to do. And that is an abuse of the rule of law.
Okay, I agree with that. But again, and I am getting defensive. Is it the coppers' fault for caving into the people? Because obviously people are down at the front counter, and like, you'd remember this, I know you weren't in the job long, people down at the front counter going, you must act on this, the law says this, and if you don't, you're a bad person. You're going to be Stonewall's going to be knocking on your door. We're going to have, we're going to have all our political people lining up against you, because policing done right actually is apolitical, but still there is always a political element to it, in so much as politics and values are very hard to make a distinction between.
I agree. Well, one, if ignorance as to law has never been an excuse. It's never been a defense. So there is that. But what I will say is that if you're a police officer, you join the police for the right reasons. The vast majority of people join the police for the right reasons. And there is, of course, an element of trust that what you're being taught by people with far more stripes than you have are telling you the truth. There's an understanding that they understand the law. Of course, they understand the law. But the fact of the matter is, they don't. They don't. And we've shown this time and time again. The senior officers are equally passing what the law says through a prism of guidance that has been written by radical ideologists. So, for instance,
they're changing things administratively.
You take much of the guidance in policing now, and it's written by third parties. It's written by third parties, and these third parties are lobby groups, political lobby groups. So what they will say is, oh, you're the police, you've had this terrible problem with racism and homosexuality. And they go, yeah, we have. Well, how about we're the experts on it? How about we write the documentation for you? And they go, oh, yeah, that's great. And the first 3 pages or 4 pages will be absolutely fine. But the deeper you get into it, then it just becomes an absolute shitfest of political corruption. And, the chief...
There is a real push to do that in Australia right now. And actually, I can't talk about it because there's a court case going through that I'm involved in, but there's people trying to do precisely just that. It seems to me that in England, again, the mother country, the fountain of all Anglosphere ideas, this has been done by the police, which is strange and sinister. The way that it's happening in Australia is through these, we've got all these human rights commissions, the Federal Human Rights Commission and all these other human rights organisations. And, oh, dude, they don't even, because none of these people have ever even been trained. Like, so the idea of rule of law to them is like, I've actually spoken to a couple of them when I was still in the police. Like, I was speaking to a couple of these people at events, and and I said, well, rule of law, and these people are like, ooh. So, these Westminster principles, and this, honestly, I had one lady's brows furrow, and she started explaining that it's a kind of like, well, it's a bigoted white concept, and we're actually trying to overturn this. So there was like this, okay, but to a certain degree, you can't say it's complete codswallop because they're kind of right. Like, it isn't. It's an English idea. I mean, it's not the only place that these ideas existed, because people get really angry. But this is the place where it came into the highest degree of resolution. This is where the Magna Carta was written. this is where you had, the courts separated from, this is where all of these things happen. So you can't say that, oh, no, this is a human thing that happened everywhere. No, it was an English thing and it was spread through colonization. Like, yes, that happened. So if you're out to overturn that, like, how powerful are your human rights commissions and stuff like that? Do they have much power actually enforcing this? Because they're the people that are doing and pushing it over here.
Well, I'm sort of torn on this because, of course, I use the European Convention on Human Rights to win my cases. So, in principle, I don't like interference from foreign states, which is Europe, particularly post Brexit. But in practical terms, it serves us quite well. Article 8, 9, 10, 11 are quite useful in terms of showing Europe, wider than British jurisprudence, the treasure, which is the right to freedom of association, the right to a family life and a private life, the right to hold and discuss an opinion, the right to vocalize that opinion, the right to meet with people of a similar opinion. Those things are quite important. And I would, if we're going to get out of the ECHR, which I think we probably will and probably should, I do think that those things need bringing in, and we need to adopt those as part and parcel of our British or Australian jurisprudence in order to protect and preserve them. We shouldn't need them. In principle, we shouldn't need them because there should be an assumption that that we have these things, and that's one of the reasons why I resist the Bill of Rights.
Yes, that was my next question.
Yeah, because it says the state has given us the right to do this. No. We have this. We already have this right. We already have this right. So I'm against the idea of a Bill of Rights because I think that it's taking us down entirely the wrong pathway. It redefines in trying to preserve and protect.
License.
If you look at states that have got bills of rights and constitutions, they tend to be the much newer states, like America, for instance, which is I suppose in many ways the gold standard. That was an attempt to make at a point in time what they'd taken for granted over thousands of years from Britain. They needed it because there wasn't that historicity there in the US. So they tried to codify what they already had in Britain. But we are in Britain. We already have that. So let's not pretend that we don't. Let's not codify anything. Let's just stand for the rule of law, the sovereignty of the individual, right up to the point that the sovereign, through the legitimate organs of state, says this far and no further. No, that's it.
But that's nested in certain cultural assumptions, Harry. That's nested in a lot of cultural assumptions. And if your culture has changed that much, really? And the second thing I'd like to ask is, and it's related to that, because the courts are going to reflect the intellectual climate and the intellectual cultures that are going through right now. And I don't want to talk too much about what's happening in some Australian courts, but do you trust the courts to interpret this law in the manner that it was written and taking into account the cultural understandings and axioms that happened at the time?
No, that's where the rubber hits the road, because I don't, and I have very good reason not to trust it, because there's this thing called the Equal Treatment Bench Book, which is the Bible of the judiciary, and it's a rolling thing, so there's never one definitive version of it. It's an iterative process. But if you look at the latest version of it, it is chock-a-block with critical race theory, with queer theory, so that not being racist is no longer enough. Now, to not be racist, you have to be vocally anti-racist. You have to assume all the premises of Black Lives Matter. You've got to. There is an assumption that white is bad, that black is good, that our history needs recovering, etc., etc. My argument is, if if somebody is accused of racism, you're going to have to rely on a judge now to not look at the equal treatment bench book in order to give you a sound verdict. That can't be right. That can't be right. And again, it's a case of ideological creep infecting and infiltrating and being codified within these non-law, non-legal,
tribunals,
guidance books, people, how-to books, which even the judiciary follow. And we challenged the judge over this, and he said, "I'm not having any bench book tell me what to do." And I said, "Well, that's all very well and good, Your Honour, but that's you. But if you read the foreword of the Equal Treatment Bench book, it says quite specifically that this is for judges throughout the courts of England to consider and take seriously. So if we've got to rely on you going, screw, I'm not being led by that book, we have to make a decision. Either the book's an utter waste of time, in which case get rid of it, or you're that one judge that's going to ignore it. Now, we cannot rely on finding that one judge who's got the common sense to ignore the Equal Treatment Bench book. So it's everywhere. So in that sense, I suppose I'm talking myself out my own argument. I think my argument of not having a Bill of Rights is based on principle, when in fact we need something to counter this nonsense.
I agree with you, and this talks me out of my own argument as well, because I think, oh God, let me be right, that this is just a fad, and it's going to die a natural death. And it'll be one of those times in history when people look back in a relatively short amount of time, so 100 years or so. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of pain in 100 years. Well, that's 3 generations, 3 and a bit generations. People will look back and go, what the heck were we thinking at that time? These people just went absolutely nuts. Look, this is genuinely comparable to, the worst times of, we always use American examples. This is genuinely comparable to Jim Crow laws, where people
of course,
absolutely
the moral panic around McCarthyism, around communists and Reds under the bed, all that sort of stuff. Instead of Reds under the bed, it's now transphobes under the bed, and it's ridiculous. But this is the point of time that we're at. So we have to fight the battle that we're in. And I always say, it'd be great if this was sort of a 6-year war, and I'm now 4 years into, in 2 years' time we can have the victory praise. But the truth of the matter is, it's probably more like the 100 Years' War. And I'll probably not see the victory. I'll see victories, but not the victory. But it's incumbent upon each generation in those longer wars to do their bit, and that's all I want to do. I want to do my bit. We've got this thing where Churchill was the real fascist.
Oh,
what? That's because you don't understand what fascism was. You think fascism is refusing to wear a they/them pronoun. It's not. It's not. It's this ridiculous notion of national superiority, where you think that you have a right to cross over into other people's lands, slaughter and kill them in order to fulfill your ideal of expansion. And it's where you think that you are so convinced by your own racial superiority that you can invent a gas chamber and try and exterminate an entire genus of people. That's what fascism is. It's not to do with saying I don't like your they/them pronoun batch. I'm a big Steven Pinker fan, and if you look through history, our history is seeped in conflict. It's seeped in slavery and bloodshed and conducting terrible crimes in the name of the tribe because we don't trust the tribe over there. The miracle is not that we still do little bits of that now. It's that we've grown out of it. That's the real miracle. The miracle, that's the real progress. But to look back and go, any part of our past history that didn't behave like we do now, that they were non-humans, they're all fascists and Nazis, that is to deny the progress of history. So of course everybody is a product of their age. Everybody is. So was Churchill perfect? No, of course he wasn't bloody perfect. Are you perfect? You're not. No. And judged by the standards of 1,000 years' time, you're probably an evil fascist, Mr. Pronouns person.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think it'll take that long time. I genuinely do not think it will take that long. And
no, I don't either. But
you're going to get all these people.
We're all tribal. And we see this, so particularly with football matches.
Yeah, I know. I noticed that in England. Yeah, it's our default setting. Like this is part of
our first nature, rather than our second nature. Our second nature is to be kind and respectful and use an eye for thought. But our first nature is still quite bloody tribal. And you see this in the theatre of a football match. You do. You see it where we sing about our hatred of the other tribe and the other colours. It's a theatre that replicates in a relatively sanitized form the sort of battles that used to turn into absolute bloodshed years and years ago. One of the things that I got into huge amounts of trouble for was I did the hashtag Say Yes to Hate. And I did that with a very specific reason. The police, I think it was West Yorkshire Police, were saying hate is a crime. Or if you're not kind, it's a crime. I'm like, that's not true. And I put very specifically, I said that hate is an everyday human emotion like love and anger and jealousy. The only time we should be bothered about hate is when it tips over into criminality. Of course, we say no to hate-based crime, but hate, we say yes to hate. And that went absolutely mad. He said yes to hate. He said yes to hate. Well, hold on a minute before you get on your high horse. Let's have a look at how the College of Policing defines hate. They define hate as antagonism, ill will, ill feeling, and dislike. Now, hold on a minute. If that's the definition of hate, I'm right to say yes to hate. And I'll tell you why. Our entire judicial system is based upon antagonism. We don't go in and sit around and work out the facts. We have barrister on one side, barrister on the other side, and it's a fight to the death. It's an antagonistic system that we have. Our parliament is based upon an antagonistic system. The ayes to the right say, yeah, and the nays to the left. And it is structured, parliament is so structured that there is a 2 sword length gap between the front benches. Yep. Because it is a theatre of hate. There is a recognition that hate doesn't need eradicating because hate is a human emotion. Hate needs managing. That's all. Manage the hate. So put the football fans with the red scarves over here and put the football fans with the blue scarves over here. Put the Labour benches here and make sure there are 2 sword lengths between the Conservative benches here. Hate itself is a human emotion. We cannot, must not, should not eradicate it. We just recognize it for a thing that it is. We need to manage it. That's all.
You think of the assumption behind that. People think that, like, if you join the right team, that it somehow eradicates hate from you, rather than recognizing that hate is something that, that the line between good and evil runs down, not between being a right side and the side of the angels and the side of the demons, but that line runs down between every human heart. Really, but when it comes right down to it, the thing that astounds me, being a Catholic, about this entire woke movement is it's a weird distortion of Christianity. Because, there's this Christian idea but it's an upside down Christianity. So it's kind of recognizable when you look at something upside down, you go, oh, that's that, but it's totally upside down. That's kind of what it is. Because, the Christian idea that by faith alone that you are healed. And a lot of my evangelical friends, God bless them, genuinely think that, well, all you got to do then is subscribe to this belief and you're saved. It's okay. It's like, well, no. If you genuinely believe something, it's going to play out in your life. If you genuinely love your enemies, if you genuinely do all these other things, it's going to transform you as an individual. It's going to play out in a certain way in your life. It's not like it's not just like, it's more than just, it does have the aspect of sticking your banner on that post and saying, yeah, I believe in this, but that's got to mean something. Whereas with the woke mob, it's just sticking your banner on. It's like, yeah, I believe this.
Absolutely, because there's the people who criticize me for saying say yes to hate. They're the most openly hateful bunch you've come across. I mean, absolutely, it's like proper old-fashioned hate, not antagonism, dislike, ill will, that kind of thing. It's proper rancid hatred. One police constable from Leicestershire sent me over 860 messages last year, reporting me to the anti-terrorist unit, sending, tagging me into chief constable, saying that I needed to be arrested, that I was armed and dangerous, that I was responsible for the massacre in Colorado last year. This is a serving police officer. 860 messages he sent me because he believes that he's kind and I'm a hater. When a police force raises the trans flag above its headquarters, when it puts the trans flag on its riot shields and displays them in public, when it says, puts on another riot shield, puts policing with pride on it, then it signals to these lunatics in the force, we're on the right side of history. We are absolutely on the right side of history here. Look, I've got riot shields with my colours on them. Of course, you, Harry Miller, you are the enemy, and I'm just going to come at you and come at you and come at you until you finally give up.
And what can you do once you, and the real irony is, these are the people that want to eliminate hate. Well, if Harry Miller really was the person that they said you were, and if Harry Miller actually seriously was responsible for the Colorado murders, and if Harry Miller was responsible for these things, well, what would it be okay to do to Harry Miller?
Yeah, exactly.
Harry Miller would then be an outlaw because, you know, the traditional outlaw, and I explained this to people, I was like, oh, I'm a bit of an outlaw. I said, no, outlaw was an actual term in colonial Australia, and I know we get it from the United Kingdom, and we know it from the American things. But what that meant was this: due process doesn't apply to you. It's not it's not that you were breaking the law. It's like, yeah, everybody breaks the law. You were declared an outlaw. That just means that, like, oh, due process, you didn't have to warn them. You didn't have to. You could just walk up and go. So you were outside of the law of due process. You were outside of the law that limits authority. That's what you were outside of. You weren't outside the law in so much as like, oh, I'm a cool, edgy lawbreaker. No, because, you know, everybody is in the lower kind of. You don't want to be declared an outlaw. You've been declared an outlaw. Fundamentally, that's what these people are trying to do. They're trying to bring back the concept of outlaw.
Yeah. Harry's a Nazi. Harry's a Nazi, and we all know it's fine to punch a Nazi. That's what it is. That's what it is. So it's like, no, show me what I've done. You show me in what way I've been Nazi, because all I've done is uphold the rule of law and encourage the police to uphold the rule of law. That is the opposite of being a Nazi. When you call me a Nazi, what you mean is you don't like the side of the political fence I'm on when it comes to gender ideology. You've no idea where I sit in any other politics because I never make it public. You've no idea whether I vote Labour, Conservative. You've no idea. But because of this one thing, that makes me a Nazi, and therefore it's open season on Nazis. Kill a Nazi. What's a Nazi? Yeah.
I wouldn't mind. Would I be allowed to have the signs of the signs that Constantine put on his shields of his soldiers? Would that be allowed nowadays? Do you think maybe the papal keys would be allowed? How would the College of Police?
Well, getting back to our example, could you paint on Orange Day? Could you paint your Merseyside police riot shields in the colour orange to signal support to the Orange community? There would be an absolute bloody riot if you did that.
And fair enough.
Put on your uniform, make sure all it says is your name, rank, and number, and which force you're with. That's all we need. We don't need any more. Just straightforward identifiers, and keep your politics to yourself. That's all we want. We want nothing more than that. That's it. Then I'll leave the stage. I'll go home and I will continue my ambition to laze in front of the telly watching box sets. Simple as that.
Okay, so tell me about Fair Cop as an organisation and what you want to do, because it sounds like you're morphing into a police association, fundamentally a union. They're going to end up giving people defence. But what else does Fair Cop do? Who's in it, and tell me about this organisation.
Okay, so Fair Cop is not officially an organisation in that it has no standing. It's not a charity. It's not registered with. It's not a company. We take the Al Qaeda model. If you say you're Al Qaeda, you're Al Qaeda. So if you say you're Fair Cop, you're Fair Cop. It's as simple as that. Fair Cop in reality is myself and the family law barrister Sarah Phillimore, who we do most of the public facing things, but we have we have a lot of allies. Graham Linehan, you can see there the great comedic writer of Father Ted, and we have a number of police officers who are anonymous members of Fair Cop because they would fear for their positions. Unfortunately, but what we're hoping to do is, now we've demonstrated that the law is on our side, absolutely on our side, is we're thinking about becoming more open about it and having a open membership and a specific open membership for police officers who are concerned about the kind of things that we're concerned about. And what I've hoped that I've done is given them the courage to come out and speak openly, rather than having to do it behind pseudonyms and anonymous accounts and getting hold of me. The cops get hold of me and they're incredibly nervous. And the first thing I say to them is, look, I will never, ever, under pain of death, reveal your identity, and I will go to prison before anybody gets hold of who you are. That's the deal. But it shouldn't be like that. It should be, we should be able to have an open membership, because all we want is the police to uphold the law in order to do what they said they would do when they gave their oath of attestation. That's all we want. We're not campaigning to change the law at all. I believe in the police. I absolutely believe in the police. I've got family members who are in the police. I had a taste of it myself. I believe in the rule of law. If I go see Les Miserables, for instance, I'm always on the side of Javert because he was just a cop doing his duty. It wasn't Javert who was wrong. It was the law that was wrong.